G'day and welcome to Mad's RC World, and you've got Steve, and today we're going to check out gear diffs, and this is in the Inferno range, 7.5, 777 and Neo. They all take the same diff casings or bulkhead diff housings as well, and so we're going to have a look at the crown wheel and pinion, how to fit that up, the side gears and sun gears inside the diff casing itself, and how to check for wear and stuff and what's going on, and then adjust the backlash in the crown wheel and pinion. Alright, so we'll get back onto the job now. Alright, so we're going to take a look at the bits inside the gear diff and the gears and stuff. And so what you're going to look for is that washer goes on the back, and also you've got to have a look out for how worn these pins are, and also you run one washer, and then how sloppy the gears are on the shaft. And it's got one washer and that shaft looks good. It just jumped off. Okay, so we'll check the next one. You see that shaft looks good. That shaft looks good. We got one washer on that one. All looks good. Check for wobble. And wobble. That looks alright. Now these gears here are the side gears or sun gears. And the reason why these are the sun gears, and these are the little ones, are the planetary gears, because they move around, the planet moves around the sun. Okay. And they look good in there. Now, got to look for hooks and wear, and hooks and wear. How on the top here where it's flat, got a flat, nice and flat, you got to look if that's pointed. And same here. See, it's got a flat spot still on there and no hooks and stuff like that. Now, these are aluminium gears. What happens with them is if you put a really mega tall pinion and gear it up for speed run, these will bend these gears, because when you gear it up on a 1/8 buggy, even with a 1700 motor, and put like a way too big a pinion, like a, I would say probably have to be a 24 or something like that maybe if you put it on there. Happened to me once where you just go along half throttle and then you pull the throttle flat out and then it'll just pop a wheel stand on the bitumen, and you bring it in, your diffs don't spin the same, and you'll see that when you pull it apart, these are all got bends and hooks in them from that weight of acceleration under load. So on the dirt you might be fine, but if you run like track ratio for on the track, because you can't overgear, if you overgear your car for the track, it's too fast up the straight, it won't work. You can't use all that throttle, so you gear it back down. I think gear ratios hover around 16 to 12 depending on that kV, so like a 2600 or 2100 might be around 13 to 12 tooth. And these here will take that wear okay at that small pinion. And another thing is the thicker the diff fluid, the more that'll wear these pins. Only reason why I think they wear more is because it's harder for the lubricant to run back in it when it squishes it back out, so it doesn't lubricate them as easy. I found when you run thinner fluid, so if you run 10,000 fluid, these will wear more. If you run 5,000 fluid, they will wear less on these pins. Alright, so general rule of thumb I found is one little thin space. If you put two each side, the gears will go in this way too far and then be too notchy and tight to turn. And if you ever want to check your gears in clearance and if there's anything wrong, make sure there's no fluid in it. If you go to change the shim ratio or something because of something's worn or something like that, because when it's dry you can feel that it's not working right. If you've got fluid in there, it'll disguise how it feels because it's using that as a slipping and a lubrication so that it won't be as grabby. So it's always best to do a dry test to see how your gears feel. Alright, so we'll check out the condition of these. They're not worn that bad. You've got a few little chips here. And where the seal runs, that's good. And the shaft is fine. Now this diff case, this diff housing case, because that's plastic molded there, I'm sure that is plastic molded. Yep. If you get a steel one that's on the end here, sometimes you've got to keep an eye out that where they're sealed around here they'll leak. Usually the plastic boss where it goes on the bearing here, okay, if that's a plastic one, that's usually ready to run style. I don't know if the new ready to runs come out any different, but when you buy these to replace, they will have a steel piece on there like that, and it's molded into the plastic, and you've got to keep an eye out for it weeping out in between here. If it does, you just got to get rid of it and get another, because you can't do anything about it. Okay, so I just got to go get me grease. Alright, so I had a look for one. I got it here. See how that's the metal housing one? And it's bonded into the plastic here, and that's where your seal fits inside here. And so there's nothing wrong with the plastic ones, they work fine. All you got to do is keep an eye on if this diameter here changes so that you get slop on your bearing, but the plastic ones are fine. I don't mind them. So yes, you do got to keep an eye out for leaks on there. Alright, so this one here, this is going to be an on-road bitumen car. Now it's got green O-rings in here and there. One time earlier I tried some out, different ones, because kyosho usually have red silicone ones. These are air conditioning O-rings. I'm pretty sure green is designed for silicone oil, I think. And they're a little bit tighter. So I thought I might have been getting some leaks out of these, but sometimes it was the metal on there. So I was trying to tighten seals up. But because this car's already got green all the way through, I'm not going to change it because that'll change the tension on the diffs. If I'm running on dirt, I'll run all red silicone O-rings. So this is a wheel bearing grease. And I'm going to put some on here to lube this, so when it spins it's not going to wear things. And stick some inside there. Okay, so get your bearing on. I'm not sure what brand of bearings these were. I think they were bought from a bearing shop. That's years ago. So instead of a model shop, they were bought from a bearing shop. You want to try and get when you put it in, you get a little bit of excess grease squishing out of there, so you want to get that out. Alright, so you track less dust. Then the little bit on there, get that out. The grease. That's a blue wheel bearing grease. Now I've got to fit this cross pin in. And he's in the center, and drop your gear in. And that's it for that one. And the planetary gears will go in. Now, some of the ready runs will come with just two planetary gears, just this. And you can upgrade, make it stronger by putting the extra set in. And then a flat spot goes to the top. And that gear goes in there. That'll sit like that. Now we've got the crown wheel. Now this is a hardened steel crown wheel. Now take note. See how the teeth are straight? Right. This is designed for, this is all buggy application. How you can, there's a truggy one, because he's different, he reaches down longer, so he's actually, these teeth go down further, so there's a deeper bell. And So for this is a buggy application, and this will run a 13 tooth pinion, and so he'll be short up there because of the gear, the pinion size. And a few things we've got to keep an eye out for is when we're fitting this up, that they're almost flush. If they stick up too much, they'll scrape around in the housing. These have to change the countersink there, or these have to be countersunk down more, and you have to use a carbide burr to do it because the metal's so hard. In a drill press, and you bring the carbide burr down, and then that'll bring it down and then get this flush. I still got to check this one off at the moment. It should be alright by the way it feels. And we've got a new gasket for him. Now this gasket is reusable. Now what I do with my gaskets, if you're racing your car and you want to change the fluid on race day, if you fit this gasket dry, it'll stick, and when you try to get it apart, it'll crack and split the gasket. So you've got to have a lot of gaskets. So what I do is when I assemble this, I put soak a little bit of the diff oil on that, so that when it comes apart it doesn't stick, and that means I don't have to keep going through these and have to worry about cleaning the stuff off on there at the track if I need to change diff fluid. Rightio, so that is the same gasket. So what I'm going to do is sit him in, get some grease on this one, and sort of that groove there, I sort of make sure that's filled with grease. And get a little bit of lubricant grease on here. Get this bearing on. Get the excess out, then get the grease off, and then put the sun gear in. I've got to get the pin in. I find just got to use the tweezers or this pointy nose pliers and get it in. And then he's on. Alright. So next we'll stick this on. Now when you're filling, we'll show you what I tend to do. So I tend to just put that on there, and then usually that stays put because it's got diff oil in it. go down. And he's on. Get your screw holes to line up. Now, I found don't run these too short in the plastic, right? And if they're wood screws with coarse thread, don't use them. You want nut fine thread. They don't undo from the plastic as easy. They more lock it. They stay where they are. And if you put longer, that'll work better as a better nylock, because the plastic becomes your nylock. Before you go down hard, just make sure it's spinning in case something's up. You don't want to jam it down and bruise things. You don't want that to tighten it with. So that's dry. And it's not notching and catching, so that's spinning fine. So I'm just going to tighten it down. Right. And that seems to be fine. Right, because I've got that clean now, it's time for this to go on. Now it's important not to tighten it down too far and go through. You don't want it to go through, you want it to stop. And you want it to stop under the plastic. That feels good. And we've got the shims here to space the diff, this way or that way. Right, so I'm just going to leave that as that dry for the moment. And so we'll bring the car over. We'll get the body off. Now, this is a 7.5 chassis. It's the green one, but not milled out. Still in pretty good nick. I don't think you can buy them anymore. I think that is a Kanaway version 7.5 non-milled out. I like the non-milled ones because they just got more strength for stop bowing and stuff like that, just more structural, better. Now, just so you know a little bit about this car, speed control normally goes here. Well, we put them over here and we put the receiver there open. The reason why we do that is when this car's got the speed controller there and the receiver inside this little box, the car just sits like that. Like, it's just too much weight this side all over here. So, because of the batteries are in here, like equal it up, and then your car doesn't sit as over as much. It sits more flatter on the suspension, and so it makes the car a better car to use. So if you want to do that setup, you can, like, grind that out or do such things there. Not as waterproof, but for racing, you're not racing in the wet. You might have a watered track. If the track's soaking, don't put your car out. It'll just ruin it. What'll happen, I've done it before, it'll ruin. You've just got so much cleaning. Right, so this diff the back can be taken out while it's in the car, and you can change the diff by taking this housing off, and the sway bar, you just lift it up the top instead of sliding it off the grub screws, and take the back pin out, and then you can get the diff out. Now if you're fitting a pinion and bearing in here, you've got to take this whole lot out. It's better to. It's just easier to work with. So just got to unscrew this here to get this stay off, and then get the 4 screws out underneath, and then take the diff out. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'll get them out, and we'll go from there. Alright, so I've got the diff out, diff bulkhead. Gonna get these screws out. Now I'm going to change these pins around the other way. Explain to you that you've got to undo these screws here to slide the whole thing out, when it can be a pain to do. We'll have a look at that. Most of you guys will have E-clips and pins through here. This was out of an old kit that would have been discontinued. I can't remember the name of it. And also you'll probably have Phillips screws in there. I changed them over because they strip out easy, and they've got coarse threads. Fine threads seems to not give a problem in the plastic. Now these top screws, I think they need to be longer. Alright, so that's got grease on there and stuff like that, and he's pretty fine. Now, one of the big things we've got to make sure of is this pinion here doesn't reach too far and touch and scrape on there. Oh, the other thing I'll talk about is these are straight cut gears. See how they're black? if you get anything that's silver coloured, there must be a muck press metal, and they're slightly helical. They came out in the US Inferno, and I used them once, and every race I went out I broke a tooth off the crown wheel, so I couldn't use them. They were just too weak. So these black ones are the go. I'll get you the part number for that later. So got the bearings each side. The chassis notch is there, so we know the diff goes this way around. Now if you look inside, there is a bit of gap there. You can see it. But how you're supposed to check this off is you really need to put the casing together and then screw it all back down. And screws here. If you run too short, now how you check your screws off when you're buying them, you just stick that in, and then you put your fingernail there or something there, and that's how you measure what length. These could be longer if I want, but they're not a bad length. They've got that much plastic to screw in, that's a lot of plastic. So he's in. Alright, so you can move the diff like that. So no backlash there. Move it over, you got some backlash. Alright, so two ways we can check is a piece of paper in there, but or a feeler gauge you can stick in there. You've got to make sure that high spot here is in the pinion area down in there. And so I've got to go get a feeler gauge and then we'll check it out. Alright, I've got some feeler gauges, so I'll have a look what I've got here. And I can stick that down in between there. Right, so that one goes through easy. So you got 4th thou or 0.12, 0.102 of a millimeter. Right, so I'm just going to go the next thickness up. They're a little bit older set, probably need a new set. It's got clearance there. Right, so it's got clearance there. Oh, we've got to go up. Right, so I was going back down. Right, so that's got a bit of drag on the housing, and so what's that at? Oh, the writing's not on there. So what's that at? I can't read that. It's so tiny that there's not a spot on there. It might be 0.2. Yes, it is. It's 0.2. 0.1, 5, or 0.2. Let's see if we can So what gauge is it in between? I think it's 1.5. 0.15. And it's probably 6 thou. So that's the distance I've got in there. Now, what you've got to look at is two things. If that goes in deeper, that means that diff's got to go over more. Right. So it's not in the center. So if you go over that way too much, because you've got that too far in, and it's going to touch probably anyway. And another thing, if you don't have feeler gauges, what you do is you loosen this grub screw off, and then you can check the clearance. And then there's a shim that you put in behind there. I'll get it and show you. Alright, so here's a bearing and a pinion, and you put a shim on there, put that there, and the more shims you put, the more that'll push that up. Take the shims out, then it comes down back that way. Right, so that's how you shim that there. And if you don't have feeler gauges, you should be able to get that to, as long as you got clearance going backwards and forwards, you know, like a small amount, you should be able to get a feeler gauge set in there, or whichever, it'll go in there. Some diff, if that's too much that way, then you mightn't get it in as easy, but you can get a feeler gauge that's bent. But right, and the reason why we've got to screw all this down is so we force this down hard to check that off, so we know that we're in the right spot. It's best to have the clearance between there, that way you're not going to wear off there. Now that is never worn off there, and that housing's been in that car before, ran. I removed the pinion, the crown wheel, to use on my other car, because the bearings collapsed and then I damaged the teeth, so I had to get a new crown wheel. So if you catch them early, if the bearings collapse, you will save that crown wheel. But if they get too rounded, it's not going to be good. Alright, so that's 6 thou, or 0.152 millimeter. Found some feeler gauges that I could read the writing on. So that's the gap in there between your diff housing and your pinion. So, see how tight this is? I can't undo it. This has Loctite on there so that it doesn't come undone. You always got to put Loctite on this, or else you'll have too much trouble. Now I've got the soldering iron going. I'm going to show you how we get this off. We put some heat on there. Put my finger next to it so I can feel it transfer. I can feel it getting hot. I can't hold my finger there any longer. And then got it. Now if it doesn't get it the first time, got to do it the second time again and then heat it to just enough. The heat breaks it down so that it's easy to crack the Loctite. Okay, so the drive shaft's out. Now, I don't know if you can still get these anymore. Might be able to get them aftermarket, but not genuine. The thing you've got to look for is getting too much flat spots in here, and the wear in the back of there. Right, so see, so you can tell it's safe because it's got some movement. Backwards and forwards. Right, so get this back out. That's not a bad length, that one, to go in there. Get this out. And we'll have a look at this pinion. Alright, so we're just checking out these shims here. What measurement have we got? We have 0.6. So if you point, you got half a mil, then the 0.6 lines up on there. It lines up on that. Alright, so we're at 1.15. If I wanted to make more clearance there, I'm just going to measure what thicknesses I've got here. So I think it's a little bit close. It's not bad, but it could be a little bit close. So let's say that's 2.2. That one's about 2. I reckon this one's a 3 because he feels thicker. No, he's a 2. He's thick. No, they're all about the same thickness, so they're all 2s. So, because we put the filler gauge in there, that's what we're getting. That's where I could put it from, because that's where we measure on that flat bit. So that's where our clearance is. Right. Trying to see why that colour is shinier there. It's almost like it's been touching, but this is the case, it's always been in there. It's got the clearance of that. So you can push that with your fingers, right, and then feel that clearance. Just going to take one shim back out because I was pushing more equally there. It was. Then you always got to bolt your housing back on to check it off. So this is like a preset where you're going to choose. I just say that's still a little bit too much clearance. No, I'm going to go with that. I'm going to leave that one out. I like it better. I mean, that had clearance there, but it's fit fine. Alright, so where's that? Where's it gone? So there you go, it was notchy because when I did it up, that was too far over that way, causing the gears to be too tight in the mesh. So now it spins free. So for some reason it wasn't allowing it to float over. And then we'd get that plastic there. I just reckon that's a better clearance thing in case you get movement. So I'll stick this back in. So that goes through a lot easier now. And I can't use that one, well I can, but we'll try the 11 just to see what he's at. So he's now at 11. So he's 11th thou, or 0.279 millimeter. So I'd work around those feeler gauge settings. I'll stick this one in just to see how loose it fits. Yeah, he doesn't pull where I'm going to stick that one in. He's got a little bit of pull there. I think if I stick the 12 in, it'll be really a lot tighter. So these are good clearances for that pinion to be away. I reckon that's a little bit close. So I'm going to say you want your pinion to case clearances are best at these measurements. And when you put the pinion down, that means the diff can go over, right? So there, when I'm pushing over, I can see it by eye that this end point, where if you look there where that the end of the drive shaft groove is on the out drive, that's about the same distance as that one. So that means with diffs in the center, right? If you get diff too much over one way, sometimes they can bottom in here when they hit. Now if you are hitting this dog bone is bottoming inside there, that'll damage your bearings because it's hammering it across, and it keeps putting hammer marks in there from that, and then it puts dents inside. The balls will put dents inside the cages, the inner and outer cages, and then it will make it notchy, and then it'll make it disintegrate and fall apart. You'll get more slop and more movement. So you can't be so you have to check the suspension in the car and then work out if you've got something wrong in your setup or your shafts are too long. And now we've got this clearance all set good, and this here set nice and equal. Right, so we've got the diff in the center now, just about in the center, because what next we're going to do is shim it over so that we get, because if we're up this way hard, right, there's no clearance, and we'll talk about that shortly. Right, so this grub screw, we've got to tighten this on this shaft, and I need to get some Loctite for it so it doesn't come undone. See, so because I've had Loctite on there before, what I'm doing is I'm making sure that that screws all the way through, so when I tighten it up I can put the weight get the weight on this flat spot. Right, I better go have a look for some Loctite. Alright, so I've got the Loctite now. Can use a blue Loctite on here, that's fine. Right, so if you put two lesser Loctite on, it won't go into the threads and do its job. Right, so I've stuck it in there. Now you've got to stick this on, turn it around, put your thumb, so you push your finger, push the pinion, push your thumb on there, and then do that up tight. Then grab one of these, an Allen key wrench, and give it a bit further because the leverage, you can lever off that and then pull it actually harder. Right, check that it spins, not notchy, and it's got a little bit of resistance in there because you've got grease in the bearings. And then we also check to make sure if we're getting any this way, backwards and forwards. So that's not in there, that's good. So that's ready to go. Right. So our next bit is before we, because I haven't got fluid in here yet, so we know the diff goes this side because of that cutout. That's the way you got to attempt to shim it. Right, so your diff goes, see the side goes sideways. So we're going to try and shim this diff so that, right, there's less of that in there. Okay, now I had some shims here for it. Where did they go? Yeah. Right, there's a super thick one. Sometimes you get them in the kits. I don't know why you don't. I haven't seen it. I think it's more in a ready to run, something like that. So I'm just going to stick that in, and there's no backlash there, so that must be wrong. So I'm going to just try swapping the shim over just to see what happens when I do that. Right, so I'm going to put this one on this side because it's still going backwards and forwards slightly. Still say it wants another thicker shim in there. Right, so we've got that far. We're determining that that shim goes that side, that one goes that side. So what I'm going to do now is it's time to fill the oil up in the diff, because we want to get all these screws locked down hard so that if this squeezes together any tighter, which probably won't, we're working with that tightness with the shims going this way. Turn that iron off. Rightio. So this is 10,000 weight, it's lossy, so that's what I'm going to stick in there. That's what I've got around. And so this is going to be for a bitumen car, blacktop bitumen. So when we fill it, we're going to let it soak down. And we want to be able to stick that on and not spill out. So it's a little bit of a time game. I usually find if you just cover the tops of the planetary gears, which is the smaller little ones on the cross pins, and if you use that a formula on, because if you fill your diff fluid with different levels, you get different type of diff fluid action, because you've got a little bit of air in there as well when you do that. So we'll just check this off by putting this in and just let it settle. Probably a little bit over. Just put that in there. Right, so when you push all this setup together, push this pin in, that space will take up and push that out a little bit more. Right, so what I try to do is line those 4 holes up, put this at that angle, right, and then turn it around and go down. Right, so it's down. That's an older gasket, it's already got oil on the gasket. When you use a fresh gasket like this, smear a bit of diff oil on there, and it'll stop it from sticking, so you can get it apart without breaking. Alright, so I haven't bolted them down hard yet. Pushing this on there to make sure it turns. He turns. He turns. Right, so he's done. Got to make sure these are nice and tight. So that it's pushing up there hard and you're getting it to seal. Right, so that's ready to go in. Right, so those shims go on. Now, the reason why we've got a thick shim here is to keep, what we're trying to do is if we shim over this way too much, it's noisy because these are banging in here. Right, so that's what you imagine they're your teeth. Right, now you've got to get your teeth so that they're comfortable, and that's where you get your backlash. Right, in that spot there in your teeth. So that's what we're checking for. Go too far in, no backlash. Okay. So the shim's in there, that shim's in. Turn that around. Now, if you put two type of shims in there and make it too squashed up, that'll hurt your bearings. Make them run too hot because they're too hard against each other, and that'll wear the bearings out. So if you did have a little bit of movement that way, I'm not saying that's better than being too tight. Right, so we're just gonna, so it's got a little bit of movement in that way. Now, what we're taught to be as a motor mechanic is to work on cars, or a motor mechanic, is when they're teaching us diffs, right? Even in a car, a real car, this crown wheel here can be slightly out of shape, so it might, you'll find it might go in and out. And there's other times where you'll have them perfect, smack bang on, and they'll spin true as anything. And other times you'll get them slightly a little bit. And so what you're taught to do is you turn this around and you find the tight spot, and that's where you set the backlash. Because if you set the backlash on the part that's further apart, right, and then you turn it around, and then on that tight spot it's got no backlash, so that'll cause a hum in the diff in a real car. Right, because it's coming around and goes nung, 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 because it's hitting in there, right? So it'll make a noise. So to take noise out, right, you got to look, you got to completely turn it around, and check that in every spot it's got backlash. If you find you turn it and there's no backlash, that's where you adjust that spot to get backlash, because otherwise it's hard on your bearings as well, because the gear's hitting there and then it's pushing, hammering it back into the bearing, right? So that wants shimming across a little bit. There's just a little bit of walk. Now, when you're maintaining a diff over time, like you might pull this out, refill the fluid, check your bearings or whatever you're doing, when you go put it back in, sometimes your bearing clearances change and sometimes you've got to put another shim in. Right, so I'm going to put another shim in this side to get it over a little bit. So when you go to put a he wants to go. When you put a shim in, if you've had a few shims laying about and you've got spare ones laying and you want to use them and you haven't put them back in their container, you got to go measure what you're putting in so you know what. So that's a 0.2. And we'll stick him on there. I'm just going to move the rest of these out so I don't knock them. I can imagine they'll go flying. You've got to be gentle with your shims, because if they're not tucking in, if your shims aren't going in, you'll bend them out. And they'll always be a pain to put back in. Right, so another thing too, get myself all tangled up. Right, so that's in. You can feel how much effort that is to go in, and it just slides without heaps of pressure. If I had to have lots of pressure, then you might find that that might kick out. The shim might kick out on an angle. That's another way of knowing that you've got too much shim in there. Right, so you can hear that noise now. That's got hardly any backlash. See there, the backlash? Right, so it's moving up and down more, right? In that spot. See, it's less. That's tighter. And that's even tighter there. Right, so you can hear the noise. Right, and so you want backlash, and you just turn it, and you gotta be patient and check every revolution of that crown wheel. Most important. I've watched some YouTube there, and some people will say, oh, if it's got a tight spot, I'll let it wear in. Don't do that. You just ruin bearings, right? And it's binding everything up. It'll be noisy, and you're going to lose speed. And that's what you don't want, right? So you always set it correctly. There. So you can see that that moves more up and down in that spot. That's got a wide gap. It's got a wide gap. See, it's tighter there. And you can hear the noise when I'm doing it. Because the backlash and the gears are closer together, the hammer of that is not as loud, right? So hear that? the hammer's louder because that's wider. So, and I'm happy to leave that shim at that. It's not really moving over. And like, if you use your finger and you don't have to put as much weight to rock that, right, then it's not too tight that way either. There's another way of checking that tightness. When you slide the housing in, and also when you rock like that. So that's how you should first set it up, right? When it's in the car and you want to take diff out and change the fluid, you can. Alright, so when you want to take when it's in the car and you want to take this housing out to change fluid or to maintain it, right, you put your washers left and rights. You can look at this cog and say, oh, it's bedded in a bit more. You can check the backlash, right, and make a decision. If there's way too much, that you got to put a thinner washer in this side to bring it over more. Then that'll put the teeth further in. Okay. So I'm happy with that adjustment. That's perfect to go in the car. Right, now I've got to figure out which way I'm going to put these pins around, because beforehand they were in the wrong direction to me. Right, so let's get these drive shafts in. Oh, that's in the wrong. It's got to go under. Why have I not done under? That goes under. Right, so that one's in. Okay, that one's in. And put these nuts on for now. Because I'm wanting them that way so that when I take the diff out, I only have to undo them and not take the whole pins with it and try and muck around with the nuts up here. Right, now we're going to get some grease on this diff. Right, Now the grease that I like to run on these gears is, I believe it's a chassis grease. It may be used for, like, in the trucking industry where for the bushes or for the plate that spins on the trailer. Very thick and gooey. For 1/8 application is put, like, even now I can still feel it in my fingers, right? It just stays. I found for the 1/8 application is perfect. So what we do is we push that into there like that. Turn him around. Because how sticky and icky it is, right, it'll always somehow always be on the gears. I don't know why, it just always will be. Even though that they're turning around and the centrifugal force and stuff like that, it just always stays on those gears. Right, so that lubrication's done. Now it's time to get, what's that doing there? Must be a bit of paint. Right, yeah, so we'll bring the car over and then we'll get the diff gearbox. Get the dog bone in. Now these have got dowels, so we've got to get the dog bone in. So what we do now is well, that's a little bit in. Okay. Get the dog bone to go in. And you see it's got a dowel to line up that goes in. Right, now we can start putting the screws underneath in. Inside. Inside. I'll measure these up so you know what. Okay, so we're using 20mm long. Now those screws at that length, the reason why I like them that long is when you're on the big jumps and the big jump tracks, they'll hold those housings down plenty enough. If you run too short, they don't thread lock properly because there's not enough thread in the plastic. When they get hot, they get a bit soft. Where's the one for that? Right. Right, do your sway bar back, gotta set these so that they're not too much rattle. So he's in. I'm wondering. Where's my screwdriver? I've got moths in here today. I can see why now that's a bugger turning them around. Gonna have to make a tool up for that. I'm going to put these up here now because I don't want them to push on them threads. So needs Loctite on them. Now that should have a nut for it somewhere. There it is. Right, so I'll talk to you about this stuff here. On the 7.5 on the Neo 777, I think that's an M3. Yep, M3. Bolt goes through there with a nylock. Now this one here, see, he's bigger. I think he's an M4. I put an eyelock and I drill all the way through, because normally they just have screws that go to there and a screw that goes to there, and they pull out from extreme upside down when you come off a jump or something like that. They just pull these threads out, right, and it's a pain in the bum. So what driver goes on him? I'm pretty sure he's the 3. So he's a 3mm head. I reckon that's 4mm through there. Yep. So you get a 4mm thread. And it goes all the way through, so you've got a bit of the bolt sticking through. Then you put the nylock on back to front, because if you put it the other way around, you can't get it out, because it's sunken in. So you just put the nylock back to front, do him up. That is what I've come down to, as in that's hardcore racing for one of them cars on the big jump tracks. That won't fail. That's how over the years I've had to do it to test it. Rightio, so this has got some special parts on here that you can't get anymore, so I'll let you know what they are. I believe these are K factor. That's a composite between carbon fibre and aluminium, and same with the front ones. And also here, because this is a bitumen car, that's, I think it might be a PVC hose, and you get a hole in there and you get a hole through there, big enough for your standoffs. Slip them over your shocks, right, like that. Take a shock in to get the right size and make sure it goes over it tight. Sometimes I've had to put them in hot water to get them on. And then you put the hole in there to get your screw in, so when you go upside down, it just wears on them. Rightio, so this is ready now. This is ready now to go out for a run. That's done. So next we'll get the batteries in her and we'll go out for a run and show you how she works. Rightio. So we've got some Louise tyres on here, rockets. They look alright, they've got pretty deep tread. And this is the one we've rebuilt the diff in. Put the spur, the crown wheel and pinion in the back. So we're going to have a try around the NASCAR track and see how it runs. You let me know when you're ready. Alrighty, so we'll hand you over to Chris.
Yep.
And you're ready to have a go?
There we go.
Alrighty. Send her out.
How quick's that go?
I'm not sure, I've got a speed meter on the other one, I'll let you know.
Hey, right
You flat out over the back there, Chris?
Yep.
Wow.